Okay, this will be an addendum to the Tricknology series by Dayz of Noah and myself on Monday nights. We talked about the connection between hip-hop and the occult. A lot of things that I was trying to say got lost in the bad connection, which was on my end, so I thought that it would be appropriate that on my end I do a little addendum and try to repeat some of those things with a little visual aid. And again, this won't take away from what we're going to deal with on the next Monday, because there's a lot to this subject. But I just wanted to deal primarily with the brotherhood aspect of the subject, the occult roots from the blue to the red lodge, as we talked about in that show, and I don't think a lot of people got to hear. There was a connection between the Blue Lodge and the New York domination of hip-hop, and a connection between the Red Lodge and the California domination of hip-hop, the two states that epitomize, or two states which contain cities that epitomize the idea of an American city, New York and Los Angeles. They have a lot of comparisons and a lot of contrasting elements that people have talked about, from comedy to sociology and beyond. The New York side of things is where the art form, which we may want to question calling it that, started. Well, we can't deny that it was indeed an art form, but what that means is going to maybe perhaps be in question. It definitely started in New York. It's interesting that blue is representative of cool, or can be considered for coldness. Red, representative of hot or fire, can be considered for warmth. And the Blue Lodge is the more of the working man's lodge, or the beginning of their journey as traveling men seeking the source of the light, which they find out later on after advancing in degrees, is the false light, or the blinding light of Lucifer. Many artists, singers, rappers sing and rap about that light, and many lament about their inability to find it, and even their frustration with finding out what it is. So we have the Blue Lodge having an effect on golden era hip-hop. There was a time when hip-hop music was much more diverse, and there were categories or subcategories within the category or genre of quote-unquote hip-hop. By the time I graduated high school, which was 1991, that started to change. It hadn't changed yet. In 1991, you still had a presence in hip-hop, or one of these particular genres had a presence that was primarily positive, but not necessarily righteous, divine, or holy, quote unquote, but it was at least positive, in that there was a genre called knowledge rap. Some called it conscious rap. Later on, as kids, we called it knowledge rap, when they got ready to demonize this particular style and cut it out of the equation for obvious purposes that you'll see and figure out. They changed the name from conscious, or they changed it from knowledge rap into pro-black radical rap. And there was even, I believe, a move behind the scenes to push a particular type of knowledge rap, one that could help them to bridge over into where they wanted to, the synthesis, which would be, in the beginning, street knowledge rap, or gangster rap with a knowledge infusion. Paris, from the Bay Area, may be an example of that. The best known example of that was NWA, who claimed to be kicking street knowledge. And Ice Cube would even take that to a further degree. But in 1990, because I can hear Professor X say 1990 from the X-Clan album, in 1990, it was still trendy even to indulge in knowledge rap. It was so trendy that commercial rappers had to acquiesce. And, on at least one song on their album, they would be remiss if they didn't have at least a single offering of knowledge rap. It was such a popular category. And in my opinion, and from the polling of my friends at the time, it was the most popular category. It was growing fast and taking over. And the result of that, which may not have been totally what the powers that be expected or wanted, as God tends to take the things sometimes that the devil means to destroy us, or what the elders would say, what the devil meant for bad, and turn it around for good. One of the results of that knowledge rap was that you had more inner city youth taking pride in their vocabulary, taking pride, and again, pride is always going to give you a blind side in the end, but taking pride in knowledge, seeing knowledge as power, seeing knowledge almost as a substitute for God. So you had the good side of it, which was that, or the positive side, because you can say something is positive or negative and it not be good or bad, like a charge from a battery is positive or negative. It's not good or bad, it's how it's used. But it was positive, at least, in that, I would not be the way that I am about words and, and the spell of spelling and whatnot, had it not been such a trendy thing when I was a teenager for you to have an expansive vocabulary so that you could be better at rapping. Folks of a certain age know what I'm talking about. It was the antithesis to mumble rap today. Today, they figured out how to get that lion under control, and now it's literally a pussycat. But in the day I'm speaking of, again, when the Blue Lodge had a great effect on the music, and again, think of the Blue Lodge as the lodge that philanthropic things are done through, the lodge that is used as the facade or the face of the Brotherhood to make the Brotherhood look benevolent. The Blue Lodge does much of that work boots on the ground. You don't find out so many about folks who belong to the Red Lodge. They will generally move from blue collar status to white collar status, and generally, again, there's exceptions to the rule. I'm not talking about the exceptions. I'm talking about the rule. Generally, they'll move from New York to Los Angeles. So this entity that was hip-hop was also moved in a similar way from the blue collar to the Blue Lodge to the Red Lodge, and proverbially from the blue collar status to now it was about to be exalted. And Hollywood would take over and reshape its image in the form of hood movies. Similar thing happened with Motown. Went from a blue-collar town, blue-collar music, blue-collar people producing it. It had a certain energy, more boots on the ground, more relatable to the people, and perhaps in some way more pure in its form. And then it became Hollywood, and it literally was moved out to Los Angeles. Now, this is not an indictment on California, not like Common's I Used to Love Her record, but kind of breaking that down on an esoteric level and recognizing that both the Blue Lodge or the Blue House and the Red House are the houses of the devil, quote unquote. And we'll see that, and we'll find that as we progress. But I just had to give that foundation out first, that there's a reason why, in the beginning stages when hip hop was stewarded by New York, It was very heavily under the influence of the Brotherhood. Let me reiterate. And the Brotherhood is never good. So it was heavily under that influence, except it was the boots on the ground, lower level, lower house influence of the Blue Lodge. So they were teaching brothers to be civilized. Today, the trending term is to be a savage. They were teaching brothers to have verbal dexterity, to speak clearly and not merely, like Karis One said, it helped to my career. But now, as opposed to speaking clearly and having a grasp of vocabulary, which was threatening to the powers that be, of course, on many levels, these young men are encouraged one way or the other, if by no other way but economically encouraged, because they know it sells. They're encouraged to mumble rap, mush mouth rap, so to speak. So there was a move. And, things appear when a conspiracy is well orchestrated, then that conspiracy will make things appear to happen organically or by happenstance, or as people mistakenly say, coincidentally. But they make you mispronounce the word coincidentally so that you don't recognize the word coincide. Big and bold, plain as day, plain as the nose on your face, inside the word coincidentally. So it coincides that it was moved from one side when it was less lucrative for the artists, but more dangerous for the powers that be. It was moved from that Blue Lodge that had that distinction of creating this form of music. And again, there are some people who talk about Project Sedgwick being a CIA project that actually seeded hip hop in many ways in the city of New York for this purpose. These devils understand ley lines. They are guided by unseen beings and forces. There's, without a doubt, a spiritual aspect to hip hop that's often left out. So some believe that the spirits set up this situation. Better said, the devil and his agents set up this situation to move like it did, to grow as it did among the kids who went to the discos in New York City, which at the time were, predominantly discos that patronized the alphabet community. And you know which alphabet I'm speaking of. Yes, the alphabet boys were involved, but I'm talking about the notorious community that is taking over many facets of our lives and taking many freedoms away from us in order to, or under the guise of gaining their own freedoms. But so these kids in these discos, it is said by some, where the disco ball is reflecting this hypnotic light and the music is droning and hypnotic. Disco music had a droning aspect to it. Thump, 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 thump. Much like techno music and house music today, this hypnotic atmosphere was used alongside the drugs that, marked and flavored the 80s and the late 70s, and the free love that went along with it. This atmosphere is where the seeds of hip hop were sown and grown up in. And yes, there were many well-meaning kids didn't know anything about any of these things I'm talking about, from the drugs to the queerness to any malevolent intention whatsoever. Some kids just wanted to come and dance. And it was a place where underage kids could go and dance. Remember, clubs are places that are generally supposed to be 18 and up or 21 and up in most cases. But here was a situation where younger kids, and primarily younger boys, were allowed to come and party. People talk about the owners of the discotheques at the time that helped to make hip-hop famous, possibly being tied in to or connected to the big alphabet boys. You know, the three-letter guys. So let's look a little bit at this, as deep and heavy as that was. I hope that that lays down somewhat of a foundation that you can hold on to while we navigate through a very deep rabbit hole. So let's look at some things. Tricknology addendum, hip-hop, conscious rap to gangster rap, the occult roots from the Blue to Red Lodge. And again, this is an extension of the Dayz of Noah series, Tricknology, to be seen on Monday nights, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 5:30 p.m. Pacific. So we have to start with, of course, not the originator. People will talk about Kool Herc and others, but most definitely the person who made hip-hop the popular entity that it is today, or the person whose songs are considered to be the most groundbreaking songs which helped to introduce the world to this underground genre. It's Afrika Bambaataa. And if you notice, as we're talking about the hip-hop and brotherhood perspective, we're going to see certain signs and symbols being used by individuals who are influential in shaping this art form. Now, there's always a secret society operates in secrecy, of course. So there's always the profane definition of a symbol, or, the layman's definition of a symbol. They call us the profane, folks who are uninitiated. So the uninitiated may see a symbol as meaning one thing. Oh, they see the Eye of Horus or the Eye of Ra, and they say, oh, well, that's just giving tribute to our history. That's the very lowest and basic level of understanding. It's a bit like when we've talked about the songwriter secret, and we use Rick James' Mary Jane for an example, or The Weeknd's I Only Call You When It's 5:30 song. I forget the name of that song. No, I Can't Feel My Face. That's the one. In both Rick James, Mary Jane, and in The Weeknd, I Can't Feel My Face, you have this multi-level understanding that's very indicative of what happens behind closed doors with these secret societies. There is a secret. The secret is, in the instance of the songs, what does the song really mean? To the little kids listening to Mary Jane, or to the little kids that may be ear hustling, hopefully, that's all they would be doing, because I know you wouldn't be playing The Weeknd for your kids, but to the little kids that might be ear hustling or listening to the radio, and they hear I Can't Feel My Face, it has a bottom meaning, or a first degree meaning, a meaning for the uninitiated. And in both examples, it is about a love interest. It's Rick James talking about a girl named Mary Jane he's very infatuated with, or it's The Weeknd talking about a girl whose love has him in such a daze and has him so delirious that he can't feel his face when he's with her. That's the bottom level. That's the basic Baby Bear layman's interpretation. You move up one level. Again, assuming this is 3 degrees or 3 levels, like you're told that you have to take in order, or master in order to get the title of Master Mason. It's 3 degrees, you're told, in the beginning. So there's 3 layers of meanings in these songs, which make a great analogy for the degree system in the Brotherhood. So I'm going to have to take a moment and break it down. And I thank you for your patience ahead of time. The 2nd degree meaning is, oh, Mary Jane, he's talking about marijuana. And for the weekend song, it's, oh, he can't feel his face. He's referencing the movie Blow, which was about cocaine and cocaine dealers. So, oh, he's talking about the sensation that some who have used cocaine feel, where it may appear that they can't feel their face, or where the strength of the cocaine is such that it does indeed hinder them from feeling their face. And again, this is just basic level. That's basic level. But that's the second degree up. It's still not the meaning. The meaning in both cases, in instances, is that Mary Jane is being used as an analogy for the devil. And I can't feel my face when I'm with you. The you that the weekend is referring to is also the devil. So that's the third level. And in the relationship of that idea to the 3 degrees of Freemasonry, the top level meaning. So when you look at something like the Eye of Ra, or the Eye of Horus, some call it, you have to understand that there's always that same dynamic. Whenever we're looking at symbols that are used by the Brotherhood, whether you are told by your favorite teachers and researchers that it means something that's good to you or something that favors your ancestry, or whether you're told, that it's something that just favors the worship of man or the man is God idea, you still have to always recognize that, well, what I'm being told is a level. I wonder if it's the top level. Now, I can tell you that a level that's not often considered, please excuse my pleonasm, I only wanted to give an exegesis of, of use as you watch the rest of this video. Okay? So, if you look at the eye, you're sure to have heard a number of reasons why brothers and sisters, quote unquote, black folks, should use the eye and should revere the eye. But what you're not told is why Aleister Crowley reveres the eye. Aleister Crowley is famously known as saying, and I've shown it in many other videos, I didn't grab that picture for this one. Maybe I should have, but you can type it in. Type in Aleister Crowley, Eye of Horus, Mouth of Isis. Aleister Crowley is famous for saying that the Eye of Horus is so much better than the Mouth of Isis. Again, he's speaking in levels, in degrees. What he's talking about is, and I have to say what it is. I'm not trying to offend anyone. But what he's talking about is sodomizing is better than fellatio from a woman. So he's talking about sodomizing a male. And in the case of Horus, what he's really talking about is the son of a man is better than receiving fellatio from a full-grown mother or woman. That's what he means. Now, you may not know that when you tattooed that eye on your arm. You meant for it to mean something else. Well, that's fine, but just know that there are millions of people who are of higher degree who will look at that symbol and understand, rather overstand, a meaning of it that's very different than what you understood when you undertook the process of having your body etched into or written into. So that's going to be key, because this individual who is seen to be again, a founding father of hip hop, which I'm going to talk so much more about him and his relationship to the Nubian nation and Dr. York, and both of their connection to sodomy when it is applied to youth. Both of them are connected to that. Dr. York, through his membership to the Temple of Set, he is a member. He was a member of the Temple of Set. That is the temple, a branch off of the Satanic Church. It is a temple established by Michael Aquino, and that is indisputable. And Africa Bambaataa did a commercial that was on YouTube. I have it on my video, a video I did some time ago called Tainted Roots. Tainted Roots, Bambaataa, Tainted Roots, Bambaataa, the accusations, and his true religion exposed. Tainted Roots, Bambaataa, the accusations, and his true religion exposed. If you can't wait to get those connections, check out that video. It's under the video list on my channel, on this channel. Okay, so let's move forward. So this hip-hop founding father is known for having a style of dress that is very similar or reminiscent to Parliament Funkadelic in a lot of ways, not just space age or giving some reverence to the space age idea, but also giving reverence to the ancient ideas, somewhat like Star Wars does by another Brotherhood luminary and founding father of a lot of Brotherhood ideas in media, George Lucas, who also understood the relationship between space or space age technology and the ancient pagan traditions, because it was the ancient civilizations, the original civilizations. And in the case of folks who are into ancestor worship, it is the first civilizations that were first given technology, space age technology in many cases, to help to fast forward advancement of agriculture and technology and civilization in general. And they were given those things not by space aliens from outer space, but by aliens from inner space, extra-dimensional entities that we know of as devils. Devil is as devil does. Trickster entities, entities that play tricks on people, that make deals that they don't honor, and that like to use your vessel until it's used up and move on to the next one. The ancient civilizations of Arabia knew of these entities in their veneration of Allah and Allat, which I'm going to deal with that in very detailed form in the very next live stream, or in one of the next two live streams, because I have some more pressing business to get to in the next live stream. But we'll see if we get to it. But there's a lot of information now, pun intended, on a lot. But you had the ancient Arabic connection to these spirits, which the Shriners, again, a very well-known and higher degree of Freemasonry, understood. So much so they named their lodges after or they use Arabic words on their fezzes and in the names of their lodges. Okay, so let's move on. So again, you may look at it and you're thinking, oh, well, he's giving some tribute to the black man. You're like a child listening to Mary Jane and thinking that he's singing about his love interest or a girl named Mary Jane. If you look at this and you say, oh, he's giving homage to the fact that ancient Arabs were people of color or dark-skinned people what you would call black. That's, again, and that's one way that the Brotherhood lures people in, through pride, lust of the flesh, lust of the eye, and pride of self, pride of life. Now here you see him with the same symbol that's used by Madame Blavatsky in Theosophy on his fez. He's holding up the devil's horns. Now with all of the evidence here, which again, he's signaling to people who understand that Mary Jane is about the devil. He's holding the Ankh, which is a sexual symbol, a symbol of the unification of the phallus in the womb, not simply a symbol of birth. Again, that's one layer or level of the meaning, which, you shouldn't worship the creation. You should give all worship to the Creator. So it is a worship of creation icon for those of lower understanding. And for those of higher understanding, it is that God, or I am God, this quote unquote, what they would say, I am God, and I am both male and female. Okay, let's move on. And, folks who are so in love with something, folks who idolize a creation so much, like people who idolize the creation that is called music, or a particular genre within that creation, a hip-hop head, would fight you vehemently to keep from properly digesting and realizing what their eyes can plainly see. Realize, real lies, real lies. Let's move on. And of course, there was the accusations that came out of Bambaata's abuse, misuse, and sodomy, his pederasty. And another champion of hip-hop, one who loves hip-hop and sees it as a god, KRS-One, retorted concerning those accusations. And his retort was, I don't give a F. I don't care. Not that it's not true. Melly Mel has went on Vlad TV and said that everybody knew it. It was an open secret. And he alluded not just to the fact that Bam was a booty boy, or what they would call bati boy. Not simply that, but the young boy part. Which again, this music was one that drew young boys and young men, and oftentimes young boys and young men who didn't have father figures, or who had dysfunctional homes. They would gravitate toward this art form, come together one another, and, older individuals who were involved in the Brotherhood and also had their hands in this music were around these young boys and could take advantage of the vulnerability of these young men. And it said that Bambaataa did the same. B. Stinger came out, someone who a lot of the old schoolers was familiar with, and he said that he had experiences with Bambaataa when he too was underage. Some may have heard of Hassan Campbell. Hassan Campbell has turned into a notable truther nowadays, primarily from his coming out as a former member of the Zulu Nation and letting it be known that Bambaataa was indeed doing these things because he too was a victim. So it's interesting that, this was a well-known secret, according to not just Melly Mel, who's from the old school, or the original school, people would say. He's the one who he's on The Message. Most people know it by the hook, don't push me, 'cause I'm close to the edge. He said that it was an open secret. Lord Jamar, who now has his own podcast and has been on DJ Vlad's platform for a few years, also said that it was a well-known open secret that Bambaataa was like that. So let's move on. Again, here the reverence for the creation, not the creator, the association with belief systems that upheld the idea of man as God. Now, the problem, there's lots of problems with this, but the very basic problem with it is that it was the fallen ones who came and gave mankind this idea that man was God himself, so that man would turn from creation of the creator into worship of the creator. Man would turn from worship of the creator and turn towards worship of himself. And in so doing would condemn himself and cause for himself and his civilization to eventually self-destruct, which is what we're seeing now. A godless civilization, or a civilization where there's such entitlement and such pride of self, lust of the self, lust of the eye, pride of life, and such focus on self will self-destruct. So this is the problem. It's why Egypt's not around today. Worship of Egypt is not a key towards salvation, and it's most certainly not a key towards true freedom, nor of deification, because none of the people who do this are able to even get close to the feats that the ancient Egyptians did. But what you are able to do, like the ancient Egyptians did, is you are able to contact the spirits that gave them certain secret knowledge to help themselves, spirits that would aid them, what a witch would call a familiar, spirits that would, through sexual contact, transfer, spirits that encouraged them to believe that they were as gods, and spirits that also helped to promote incest, ancestry, again, worship of the self by way of worship of ancestors is still worship of the self. So you would have these men that loved themselves so much they loved other men, and also men who wanted to keep this spirit in the family so much so they had sex with family members to keep that quote-unquote divine bloodline. The Genesis 6 trick. And here again, you can make excuses if you have a reason to want to deny the fact. It may be a benefit to you, you may feel, to deny this fact because of the discomfort that you feel concerning it, but also because you love the music. Be careful what you love. It can become a god to you. But here, very obvious, you can explain it away. Oh, he's dressed like a shogun. It's a tribute to the ancient shoguns and blah, blah, the horns, and, find out what the ancient shoguns were into. All over the world where there were great civilizations who wore costumes that we look up to and have customs that we look up to. Custom and costume directly related. All of these ancient civilizations were influenced and inspired by spires, aka spirits. What spirit? Even M knows here that you have, different degrees of meaning. One person can throw up that sign and it can mean, my favorite team is the Texas Longhorns. Another person can throw up that sign and it's supposed to mean, I love rock and roll. Another person can throw up that sign and it's a deaf person's equivalent of, I love you. All of those things, again, the devil is always able to use worship of the creation as a way to pull you away from worship of the creator. So here you have the rap quote-unquote God showing you that he understands what it means, just like Bambaataa did. And just like Gene Simmons of Kiss did, who also dressed in a way to give credit and credence to ancient people who worshipped devils and demons. He overstood it even if you don't. He overstood it so much so, as you see the skulls and the roses, love for death on his blouse there or shirt. He loved the symbol so much, or rather he understood it and understood its power over people so much so, according to Anton LaVey, it was a way of hexing people. He overstood this so much so that he tried to copyright the devil's horns hand gesture. It is also reported that he dropped his procedure or his pursuit of trying to do that. Obviously, the Brotherhood came to him and told him he was doing too much. And of course, it does not matter who it is that does it. And it does not matter whether you come from music, whether you come from politics, whether you come from the Vatican. There's always this sign or symbol, whether you come from the pulpit, this sign and this symbol, in a place where, according to the scripture, the devil is the ruler. He is the prince of this world and the god of this age. The words of the Messiah. So in this world, to get ahead in this world, no matter what your industry, you need to show him, I love you. You need to show him worship. It's his way of getting the creation that the Creator made to worship the Creator, to worship him instead. He offers them a false form of freedom, and he offers them success and dominance, a position of high authority in his world. He does it for academics and scholars as well. Here you have Hillary. So just to show you that the whole red and blue dynamic is a falsehood. It's not real. It is a construct, because at the end of the day, they all serve the same God, but they have to have these, or they have to have the appearance of different sides, so that you and I, or the average person, or the person of average understanding, does not recognize this. They play both ends against the middle. Always a Hegelian dialectic. Thesis, antithesis, synthesis. Well, there's always the goal of pushing both ends against the middle, or playing both sides against the middle, giving you this perspective, pushing that perspective on you, then making you cry out for another perspective, then they provide you with that one. They give you the one that they want you to have. Again, even pastors. But most importantly, musicians, which is what we're talking about now. In order to be seen and revered as some sort of God in your field, to live on forever, you need to be a part of the Brotherhood. And to be a part of the Brotherhood means that, you'll start off at the lower degrees. But if you want to get to the top of your profession, you're going to have to study your degrees, and you're going to have to raise up in degrees. There's no way around that. And as you raise up in degrees, you will be brought to the understanding that Lucifer is the god of this age and the God that you should and must worship if you want to be on top. So again, you see this symbolism time and time again. They'll give you many different interpretations of what it means. The meaning of the sign or the symbol will change as you grow in understanding and go from understanding to overstanding, standing under in the pyramid to standing over, or as you grow from degree to degree. And as we talked about, there is Bambaataa and Hassan Campbell, who also talked about Bambaataa's involvement, and he was a member of and affiliated with the Zulu Nation, my understanding. So this was inside information. He was also attempting to get other members of the Zulu Nation to come out. There was apparently some sort of council where they did bring up these accusations before Bambaataa, and nothing has been done by and large. Bambaataa is still revered worldwide. He's still working as a DJ, hence the protection that one gets from the Brotherhood. And the connection between Dr. York and Africa Bambaataa. Again, Dr. York, one of the highest ranking Freemasons in the South, connected throughout the music business and had a label, York Records. York Records put out a single from Africa Bambaataa. And Africa Bambaataa has come out and shown that he's down with the Nubian Nation. The symbol that I showed earlier on his fez, that is the same one used by Theosophy, is also the same symbol used by Dr. York's group, which was just a blackened version of Theosophy. And you should look up Theosophy if you think that Theosophy is something good and positive. Overstand Madame Blavatsky and overstand her agenda and her flat out association with witchcraft and the Antichrist spirit. And you'll overstand so much more. So yes, there was this connection, again, between Bambaataa and Freemasonry. So the very fact he was on York Records, and then later came out after they took Dr. York down with 72 counts of doing inappropriate things involving little ones, including taking them across the state line, taking them to Epcot Center, which he had said in his scrolls, in his own writings, he called Epcot Center a mind control center, a place where MK Ultra victims would be taken for programming. Why was he taking children there? And many other things that one can point to and overstand that Dr. York was a great deceiver and a great deceiver of black people. And he was very ingrained in the music business. He had records himself. He put out records himself. Here you see, again, here's the fez with the symbol of Nuapu on it. And Erykah Badu was also affiliated with Nuapu. At one time, a lot of Atlanta rappers, members of the Goody Mob, Andre 3000 and Erykah Badu, had in common that they read Dr. York books. There's a picture of a younger Dr. York being held up by Jaz-O in the video. I think it was the Originators video, but both him and Jay-Z were connected to Dr. York, Jay-Z by affiliation, as they both were connected to the Nubian Islamic Hebrews, or the Ansar Allah community, which was once based in Brooklyn, New York. Then it moved down to Atlanta, and so did hip-hop. Let's move on. And here is Dr. York in the blue suit to the far right, and Russell Simmons in the shirt of many symbols on the far left. And here you have Dr. York's influence on Neo Soul, evident here as he's with Music Soul Child, and a number of other Neo Soul figures. And of course, here is the Doc in his Masonic regalia. Showing and proving that he is indeed, or was indeed, a high-ranking member of the Brotherhood. And his assignment was to bring young people into Masonic thought and ideology, unbeknownst to them. He was to initiate those who listened to hip-hop. And this is just a collage of different people who have quoted things that he said, or directly said his name, or referred to his teachings or his group. Yeah, I remember Missy Elliott did. Nas, the list goes on and on. So, now that we have that bit of background, you can say that a symbol means this or that to you, but or that a symbol has its origins in some black civilization or some ancient civilization of the ancestors. Well, whatever that civilization was into facilitates the works of the devil, because the Brotherhood uses these symbols. And I know there are those who say, oh, we need to take the symbols back. Sweetheart, they've been saying that for as long as I can remember. When I was in my 20s, that was the idea. That's why I got into reading the Metu Neter and, changing my name to Yanu Amenthotep, and, going through my whole Egyptian thing, thinking that that was the key to gaining power in this world, to success in this world, was to study those things. No. You have to join a brotherhood. And the Brotherhood understands much better than you do. They have access to ancient records. They have access to material that you don't have. And they understand the meanings of these things. There you even see a lodge member, the one on the right, with his arms folded, b-boy stance style. Again, and this time even next to the hexagram. It's mistakenly called the Star of David. People will mistakenly say that that's Moses. Again, they're lying to your face right in front of your noses. It's very plain to see that a hexagram, like a pentagram, is a sigil used for conjuring up spirits. Why are these sigils so important to the Brotherhood? Because they need these spirits to aid them in their endeavors, to give them song ideas, to give them ideas for inventions, to give them technology, to give them witty words in their academic writings, for whatever industry that they're in, to help them build temples. You marvel at some of the ancient temples and some of the architecture of old, and then you look at today's modern architecture, the skyscrapers of today, the most expensive buildings of today, and the design is nothing to marvel at whatsoever. Again, it is because at one time, rather than get smarter as time progresses, the devil's intention is for man to get dumber quote unquote, as time progresses. So a lot of these understandings that the ancients had have been lost or hidden from man for a purpose, for a time such as this, because you make mankind more dependent upon the spirit if you degrade him in knowledge. Knowledge has increased, but not wisdom. So rather, if you degrade him in wisdom and understanding. So there's more to know. The internet gives you more ability to know things than ever before and less ability to understand them, as you don't go to God for your understanding. You don't use Holy Spirit guidance for your understanding. You are invariably tied to your machines to give you understanding. And the machines are tied to these spirits who limit your understanding, who scrub certain information from off the internet, who make sure that they promote other information onto the internet. And so when you see these symbols being used, no matter who's using them, you can understand that they're under a deception if they don't know the higher level meaning of the symbol. They may say, well, for us it means this or that, as you see here with Chicago GDs. They may have meanings that they ascribe to the symbols, to each point this or that. But again, they don't have the overstanding of those men standing in the lodge in the preceding pictures. So they are much like the children listening to Mary Jane, thinking that it's about a girl named Mary Jane. Or maybe even one level up, knowing that it's about smoking marijuana. And that's as far as it goes. So they count on the profane and people of lower degree understanding to use these symbols so that you can reach these people who would never be let into a lodge, in most cases, wouldn't know how to get there or wouldn't have the connections to bring them into a lodge or the criteria. They couldn't meet the criteria, perhaps, or have the qualifications to become lodge members, yet they'll still have the information that the devil would want them to have, just enough information to not cause the pyramid to collapse. The bottom level of the pyramid, the bottom blocks and bottom bricks of the pyramid have to have the understanding as well that Lucifer wants them to have. So their usage of these symbols also should help anybody who is keen and has a degree of discernment. It should help them to understand that, okay, so how is it that this is a symbol of God or a symbol of godly power if it can be used for something devilish? You can't do that truly with the things of God. You would have to totally pervert them and convert them and make them something else, the way that Lucifer understands he has to make us as human beings something else altogether in order to totally separate us from the love of God and to separate us from our connection to God. So when you see these signs and symbols, it's because the ancient people, the ancient pagan traditions, were also deceived as to the meaning of them. From the very beginning, they were given by the devils so that man would eventually use them to destroy himself in his pursuit of trying to exalt himself as God through the use of such symbols as pitchforks, 666, and a hexagram, a hex, to put a hex on you. Again, symbols that are drawn on the floors of certain lodges and certain coven rooms that serve as doorways. They're not protective symbols. Anybody telling you to stand in the middle of them is trying to set you up. They're not protective symbols, though you may have seen that picture of A$AP Rocky standing in the middle of the pentagram and his partners, the other A$APs, standing on the outside, all with open books. Again, it was, either ignorance or him trying to set you up and make you think you should stand in the pentagram and do your ritual. Standing in the pentagram will allow for the devil to come up through that doorway and enter straight into you. So when you see these symbols, whether you think they're from Hinduism or Buddhism, or you're trying to evoke the older meaning of them, you can't forget or deny that gangsters use these same symbols. So perhaps they're not as benevolent as you think they are. No matter where you see them used, the goal of the secret society is to get you confused so that you will adopt these symbols into your life, although they are life-threatening symbols, demonic symbols, symbols that position you in such a way, especially in the case of mudras, hand signals, the divine design of the hand. It is a signifier of our having a likeness of the Creator. And in the devil's craftiness, he wants you to contort and distort your hands in particular positions, much like the old televisions where you had to move the antenna a certain way in order for certain channels to come through. If you do your research even on yoga positions, the origin of the idea of those positions comes from Hinduism, is that you will position your body in such a way to invite in this quote-unquote Hindu god or that quote-unquote Hindu god whom we know to be a devil. And Hinduism gave birth to Buddhism. So both of them are getting it from the same place. Again, these symbols, which people with more money and more power have more access and are likely higher degreed than people who don't have money and power and use these symbols thinking that these symbols mean something good or they mean this or that. And then for some folks, it's just more comfortable for them to believe, well, and foolish too. Well, I'm practicing Celtic religion and it's older, and because it's older, I know that it's got to be closer to the original religion, and I also know that my good Celtic people would not do blah 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 blah. Or I'm practicing the ancient Commission religion, and I know that it's older than your Messiah, and I know that my people would never do blah 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 blah. That's the deception of pride that the devil wants people to have, especially concerning these symbols, these mudras, these body positions. Oh, well, it's just an ancient thing. It predates Christianity, of course, because Jesus Christ had to come in the flesh, though he was in the beginning. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God. So he was here from the very beginning. But he didn't make himself manifest in the flesh so that it would take faith for you to get to him, not evidence. These gods, quote unquote, and goddesses have to leave these statues and all of this evidence so that you will believe in them without a need for faith. You can see them. You can touch this statue. You can touch these effigies. It makes you believe in them to a degree, but the devil still requires a degree of belief in the unseen, even from his followers. So, because he's the prince of this world, his scholars and the scholars of academia list these gods and goddesses and give more reverence to these gods and goddesses as the first. Do you understand that? That's called a preemptive strike in warfare. That's, I know that you're going to attack me, so I'm going to bomb first. So what the devil does to bomb first is to put out all of these ancient fables, these ancient artifacts, these ancient hieroglyphs, ancient cuneiform, these ancient fables and stories and myths and tales, so that it appears that the story of Christ is taken from those tales, when in truth it's the other way around. The fallen angels who came down had a degree of knowledge that transcended the temporal and the spatial. So they overstood that Christ would come. They overstood certain things had to be done by him. Certain things had to be fulfilled. So they hurried up and they disguised themselves in attractive costumes for different people with different customs, and they perpetrated the fraud and did many things that we could now look at and say, oh, well, see, I see here that there was a flood mentioned in the ancient Sumerian text, and it predates blah, 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 blah. So their goal was to get you to think that way. The zeitgeist effect, or the effect of people watching zeitgeist, was that they thought they had caught on to some kind of sacred or secret knowledge in the belief that, oh, well, all of these things come before Christ, Mithra and Heru, and, oh, you mean to tell me all of these things that they did mirror what Christ did, but they just did them before Christ? It's all tricknology, trickery. It's a preemptive strike by beings who were here on the planet walking around with human beings from ancient civilizations before Christ walked around in the flesh. And their whole goal was to fool those ancients from those civilizations into thinking that they were gods, when in fact they were banished devils, once angels, who took the fall. That's hard for a lot of people to stomach. But see, when you know that you're going to lose, when you know that history is already written for you to lose, you're a defeated foe already, all you can do is mess with time. You can try to mess with time beforehand, and then you can try in the present day to go back in time and try to change things. That's all you could possibly do. So here's just the proof. Again, so if it's Buddhist or Hindu in origin, why would the Pope do it? Why do the entertainers do it? Because the origin is the fallen angels. And the fallen angels guide all of the aforementioned groups and religions, including Catholicism, or the holy cat, the worship of the holy cat or the holy womb, Mary worship, or Mary worship rather used as a disguise for the true worship of the devil in drag, or Ishtar, or witch worship, Lilith worship, Inanna worship, Isis worship, Diana worship, Alat worship. So if these mudras were really about yoga, what was Pope John Paul doing there? What are these members of the gangs of New York doing there? I told you also, much like the Eye of Horus that we talked about earlier, that symbol has different applications too. Remember, different degrees, different meanings. On the basic level, people say, oh, well, that's 3 6s. Oh, that's the one eye. He holds it over his eye. That is also, on another degree, the brown eye, referring back to what Crowley said. Crowley knew that certain spirits, or that more powerful devils, could be conjured by doing more disgusting acts, or acts that were more degrading and devilish toward creation and the idea of creation and procreation. So what do? Anti-creation, such as sodomy. And that is a symbol for sodomy. That young man don't know that. That young man doesn't look like he knows much at all. But he certainly does not know that's a symbol for sodomy. I've shown that before. If you want another visual representation, remember as little kids, you'll make that hole right there with one hand. With the other hand, you take your index finger and you would insert the index finger in the hole to try to symbolize copulation. You can also look at the movie Friends with Benefits. Look at the cover for the movie Friends with Benefits, starring Justin Timberlake. You'll see this same idea played out visually for you, if you need it. So that's what these mudras are really all about. And that's why Hollywood is into the mudras. That's why they use these things and they put it over their eye. It is symbolic of the Eye of Horus. It is symbolic of the brown eye. And it is symbolic of the very degrading and disgusting acts that must be done in order to not only get up the ladder, but in order to break the veil of reality or break the third dimensional veil by doing something very disgusting in the eyes of the Creator. And that's all part of magic. All of those symbols are part of magic. Here again, the hexagram in the center. In the center, the letters that we know of, or that we're told by the Revelation 2-9ers, are the letters of Hebrew. I question that because I understand that in witchcraft they use, some use Kabbalistic magic. And in Kabbalistic magic they use many of the names that some of you swear by. Those of you who may have learned 5-10 words of Hebrew and think that now God is going to give you more of an ear. That's not very logical or wise for you to think so, especially knowing that you have to get this information from people who want to try replacing your nation. Let's move on. So yes, all of these symbols, they understand the meaning of these symbols. They understand that that's a hexagram, not a Star of David. They understand that. They understand that whether the star is pointed up or whether it's cocked 33 degrees or whether it's upside down. They understand. Any way you slice it, inverted or straight up. They understand the meanings of these things. They understand the 8-pointed star to represent the star of Ishtar. They'll call it the wheel of the year. The 8 points, covering every direction. North, south, east, west, northwest, southwest, northeast, southeast. Covering all 8 directions, as the devil was given dominion. So therefore he is allowed to rule over certain places and spaces. He has a particular rule over the temporal and the spatial. Things that don't limit God, because they are part of creation. Time and space are part of creation and can be manipulated to a degree. The things that God does, though, none can undo. And here again, just further showing you the usage of things that you may be taught have one meaning. The Brotherhood understands them to have a whole entire another meaning altogether. Further showing and proving. You see the Hebrew letters around the pentagram even. And, this was a picture that was obviously taken from a pagan's website, or a neo-pagan, just meaning a modern day or new pagan's website, where, their presumption or assumption is that the pentacle is something better than or different than the Baphomet because it's up, it's right side up. This is akin to people saying that, oh, well, the devil's horns is only bad if the thumb is out versus if the thumb is in. It doesn't matter. The devil doesn't make these distinctions as you do. The devil knows that the problem is inherent in the sign itself. It's in the design of the sign. Those things that we look up to the sky and see are not shaped like this. So why do we even call these stars? Let's move on. And again, twinkle, twinkle, little star. The nature of those things in the sky, we've talked about that before also. Directly related to the watchers or fallen ones imprisoned in the outer darkness. Some being stars, others being something else. Similar to what we saw in the Superman movies, in the original Superman movies with Christopher Reeve, where General Zod and them were entrapped in a prism-like prison and sent into outer darkness, aka outer space. Let's move on. And here you see a member of the Golden Dawn, or one of the Golden Dawn affiliates, wearing or using that hexagram and using the mudras together. The Golden Dawn understands the hexagram to be considered the hexagram of Solomon. Solomon fell away from God. According to scripture, he found his way back on his deathbed, or before he passed, but he fell away from God at a time. And he used a seal, or he had a seal on his ring. Brotherhood members believe, and others, folks who have read the Testament of Solomon, as I have, believe that he used that to conjure spirits and to control the spirits, he thought, to a degree. You know, they always make you think that you're in control. But he had a certain control over the spirits, or they made it appear that he had a certain control over them, better said, so that they could build his temple. And this is how many of the great ancient buildings and cathedrals are actually built. So it's the hexagram of Solomon. There's also a Mathers-Crowley version of the explanation of certain names used in the book of Lemegeton. And it's interesting that one of the teachers of Crowley had the last name of Mathers. For some of you rap God fans. As you can see, Mathers and Crowley worked together. So both of these symbols, the 5 and the 6 point, combining for 11, both of these symbols are overstood to be symbols used in witchcraft. And the 6-pointed star is really the hexagram of Solomon. Here's the symbol from Theosophy, the same symbol that was on the hat of Africa Bambaataa and on Dr. York's scrolls. And here you see the devil's horns thrown up by Rick Ross, the rapper, William whatever his name is. And here he is next to Rick Ross, the drug dealer, a man whose name he assumed in order to assume a whole new identity as an industry plant. He's one of the most obvious industry plants that we've ever seen, being that he came directly from the correctional system. And it's the correctional system that we can often point to as the culprit, the origin of the gang's use of these ancient pagan symbols. Some of these kids from these inner cities have a problem with reading, writing, and arithmetic. yet they are wielding these ancient symbols and using this ancient occult knowledge. Further proof that there's something done in the prison system, likened to the COINTELPRO program, where gang leaders, or once a person has been identified as a leader of a gang or a leader in a community, they are taught, or they are given the opportunity to become a part of a program, a plea deal type of thing, where, for less time or for total freedom. We give you this information. You spread this information to your followers. This may have happened with a lot of luminaries and some of the people that we've seen here. Africa Bambaataa was gang affiliated. The Black Spades was the gang he apparently came from, and then became Africa Bambaataa. And here's, many have seen the real picture of Rick Ross, a person who glorifies the criminal realm and is even notorious for saying things like, I'm selling dope straight off the iPhone, things to set up or to influence young brothers who looked up to him, thought he was authentic, believed his story, his street credibility, or whatever was real and not manufactured. And so they thought, oh, well, that's a good idea. I'll sell dope on the iPhone, and were immediately caught for doing so. Something a corrections officer might be sent in to an art form to do if he's given a new persona and identity. William Roberts. So you must join and do the body boy rituals, as you heard there from his song, Billionaire. It just was suspect, to say the least. So, but he's also affiliated with using these signs and symbols and with the term Freemason. Him and Jay-Z even had a song together called Freemason. So as you see here in this imagining of the pyramid of Freemasonry, there are folks at the bottom milling about, trying to do their work and trying to do their thing to gain access to higher degrees, to go up the ladder, to go up the steps of Freemasonry. And there's folks of every different religion and belief system. It is said, or it has been said, that all you have to do to be accepted into the lodge, once you find somebody that'll bring you in, quote unquote, is be a believer in some religion. Well, they use that against you. They use your supposed faith in whatever against you. And if you have Christian faith, they may use that Christian faith as a good Christian front for the Brotherhood or for the lodge that you belong to under the Brotherhood. And there is the idea of living forever, which, a God would do. So if you consider yourself a God, you should be able to, at the very least, not die, live forever. Well, the way that this is fulfilled, and this was even seen in the Imaginarium of Dr. Parnassus, they fulfill this like a genie would fulfill it, with a stipulation. It's not exactly what you expect when it's said that you'll never die. You'll die. Surely you'll die. But like the devil lied to Adam and Eve and said that they wouldn't die. They live on in our memories. So your music will live on. Your art will live on. You will be considered a god in Hollywood, but you'll be dead as a doorknob in a mausoleum somewhere or a casket in the ground. And here you see, again, Rick Ross being affiliated with the Six-Pointed Star, which the Gangster Disciples did a video and checked him for that, because having the identity or the false identity that he had of being somebody streetwise, he should have known better than to take their symbol without checking in. And some have reported that he may have had a problem or an issue with checking in. For one thing, because he's not really that type of guy. Some would say. And here, again, the symbol of theosophy, which wrapped around it is the snake eating its tail. There's no religion higher than truth. So worshiping the truth or worshiping knowledge, the snake is a symbol of knowledge. It eats itself. If the snake keeps biting its tail and keeps biting, keeps eating every inch and going around and around, boop, eventually that snake will disappear. So this is showing you that knowledge, or the religion of knowledge, is not meat for salvation. It doesn't equal salvation. It'll only create confusion. All of these different signs and symbols creating confusion. The mixing of male with female, the confusion of male with female, the confusion of darkness and light, confusion. Wrong and right. Not seeing any wrong or right. All confusion. Positive and negative can sometimes be subjective. Good and bad can also be subjective. I can think that spaghetti tastes good and you can think that spaghetti tastes bad. But good and evil, or rather holy or righteous, and wicked or evil, are not up for debate. They're not subjective. But things like theosophy teach that they are, so that you can get used to doing things that break the rules or things that go against God's natural order and against his will. And then you see Madame Blavatsky, whose theosophy used that sign and symbol. She was also one who venerated Lucifer. And like Crowley and like Albert Pike and Manly P. Hall and many others, desired to be a Lucifer, quote unquote, a light bearer, a play on words, and that we know that he's not really bearing light, it's false light, but, and it's a blinding light. But, and some folks will say, well, his name wasn't Lucifer, it would have been Hallel or Shaitan, or it's a title. And it's not a title that, sure, it shouldn't be one that he carries, but he does carry it. He carries it so much so that the name Lucifer will always be connected to the devil. So much so, no sane Christian would name their child Lucifer at this point. Though Luke is from Lucifer, Lucius is from Lucifer, or related to Lucifer, or the light, just the Latin word for light, the Lucy or the Luke, which is also related to Loki. But I digress. So yes, you see the many different symbols that promote an idea of male and female unity, or duality rather. Unity is one thing. Unity is coming together and still remaining yourself. Duality is teetering back and forth between a thing. And their promotion is duality. They want you to teeter back and forth. They want you to teeter back and forth between your own personality and the personality of the devil that inhabited you. Because they know that eventually that devil will take over. So now, there are books written which show certain of these poses that I've talked about before in this presentation. We call them mudras, poses that have been adopted for different reasons. They adopt some in yoga. I explained the reasons. It has to do with tantric sex, or it has to do with the use of positioning oneself in such a way that you are inviting a spirit in. Well, the Brotherhood, of course, makes use of these poses also. And interestingly enough, Within these poses are some poses that you've seen famous people use. These are poses that theoretically a Mason could use at a party or at a ballroom event or something, and without saying a word, he would signify to others in the room, who may also be brothers in the room, to other Brotherhood members, he could signify, hey, I'm a member too. Or in court, or wherever it is that he may be, where giving a signal to try to find other brothers would be advantageous to him. At the signing of a contract. Here you see English particular Baptist preacher Charles Spurgeon, highly influential and called the Prince of Preachers, doing this same sign of the master of the second veil. According to Duncan's ritual book, a book which I once had in my possession. And of course, there's the looking and praying to the east, which a lot of folks have adopted and adapted. It all actually reverts back to sun worship. If you're praying to an omnipresent God, then he's everywhere, not only in the east. And why give worship or veneration to the first thing, or to a temple in the east, or to a Kaaba in the east? You are showing reverence to a created thing by doing so. If the God that you serve is truly omnipresent, then he's not concerned about your spatial proximity when you're praying, just that you're praying sincerely and from the heart and mind and soul. Again, another symbol, very similar to the pound that you see people give, and the jive handshakes that you would see in movies from the 70s, and brothers and sisters in the 70s helped to make famous. A lot of sayings that we have, like "watch your back," I'm a traveling man, and a lot of sayings that we have are sayings that were born in the lodge, and a lot of stances that we have are too. This stance is a little more animated than the stance that we're going to get to here, but it's similar nonetheless. Again, famous poses that you see people do in paintings and whatnot are oftentimes to symbolize, hey, I'm a Brotherhood member. The pose with the index finger up against the ear, for example, is to say, I'm a Brotherhood member and I would rather slit my throat from ear to ear than to tell the secret. And here is the pose that we began to know, or came to know, as the B-boy stance. Here's Clarence 13X of the 5% nation, now called the Gods and Earths, who helped to make this stance famous, as many gods and earth, or what was at that time called the 5% nation, were the leaders of hip-hop music in New York City, and some of the most popular, revered, and copied acts during the golden era were 5%ers or 5% affiliates, Big Daddy Kane, Rakim, Kool G Rap, the top lyricists at the time, in most people's top 5 golden era MC list. And Clarence 13X branched off from Elijah Muhammad's Nation of Islam. Interestingly enough, though, the Nation of Islam has been seen as a black supremacy group, which, it's more than that. It's a Masonic branch group for blacks that builds off of the black and white chessboard game of racism. But when I walked into a mosque for the first time, Mosque number 1 off Wyoming Ave, or on Wyoming off Finkel Ave in Detroit, it shocked me, thinking that it was a black thing that I was going into. It shocked me to see a picture of this white man on the wall, whom they revere as God, W. Fard Muhammad. Or at least he appeared to be white. They have darkened him up in some pictures, but they do indeed still call him Allah in person. They say he is God, made manifest in the flesh. Their own personal Jesus. Here's different pictures of his arrests in various places. Detroit at the bottom two, left and right, and the top two, the left, Los Angeles, and the right, his San Quentin photo. And it was puzzling to me as I was trying to believe 5% teachings and following Malcolm X in my teenage years. It was puzzling how could you put God in jail? Or why would you allow him to go to jail? And of course, they will try to twist the story of Jesus. They'll twist the tale of the Messiah to try to make that make sense. Oh, well, why would God in the flesh allow for himself to be whipped so much that his flesh is torn and broken? And why would he allow for himself to be crucified? Blah, blah, blah. So, they try to use that example. And it's interesting that, oftentimes when you're looking at something that's used to corral black people or corral black folks' opinions, they will use lighter skinned people to do so. This is playing off of the self-hatred that many black folks have and inherited from a time when being a house slave was more advantageous than being a field slave. Field slaves generally were darker. House slaves generally had better treatment. And so you began to look up to lighter people and to desire lighter people even more so than people that may be your own darker complected self, because of the fact that you saw them as a potential chance of doing better in life. If you could have a lighter child, perhaps that child would work in the house as opposed to in the field. And that child may be able to bring more sustenance or more success to the family name if that child could pass even, or at least be embraced by massa and family, or by the white population at large that had a prejudice toward black people that's different than the prejudice that they have today, or that some have today, to be clear. But it's something that is understood by the powers that be. So, it should be understood by the powers that don't be, if it's understood by the powers that should not be. So yes, that's a trick that's commonly used, and it's also been used throughout hip-hop, as Farrakhan has been looked up to, and so is Elijah Muhammad. And now you even have leaders of movements like Malcolm X out here who are, getting people to look up to them or look toward them for leadership because of this same inherent subconscious dysfunction and self-hate mechanism. And here you have again the B-boy stance, which is Masonic. Even the positioning of the feet is the Mason standing on their square. Look it up. That is the feet positioning, standing on your square. We already see the folded arm positioning. We saw that in the Duncan's ritual illustrations. So do the math. Even in the mosque among the FOI. So now a 7 in the center of a star with 8 points. Why the 7? Because G is the 7th letter made. G equals G-O-D, or Gamar Azdubar, straight from Freemasonry. Again, brothers believe that Mary Jane is about Rick James' favorite girlfriend named Mary. What does the G in Freemasonry mean? Meaning that brothers don't see the other levels once they hear the level that makes sense to them. Star, sun, Lord, King, God are all ways the devil gave to man from the very beginning of civilization to cause man to turn away from the Creator, who is the only King, the King of kings and the Lord of lords, and to worship man's own self as Lord, Master, and creation. I self, Lord and Master. Islam, as the 5%ers would say. This is the setting free promised by the serpent of old, and a trap using the bait of do as thou wilt and the false power of magic. I said I misspelled setting there. Wrote it in a hurry. So And there was the use of the G all the time. Professor X would say, "What's up, G?" And Flavor Flav would say, G, all the time. Pointing back to this self as God. Either they meant God, or they were using Masonic terminology, or again, they were seeing Mary Jane as meaning the name of a love interest, not seeing Mary Jane as a song of dedication to Lucifer, not seeing the highest degree meaning, not an excuse, but a reason. So it's the I do what I wanna spirit, aka the Antichrist spirit, meaning I'm not following Christ. I will do as I will. Do what thou wilt is the whole of the law, said Aleister Crowley. And John Lennon and Anton LaVey and Jay-Z and a lot of other people revered in this world. And you can't spell Antichrist without the AC. Aleister Crowley is revered by many musicians, artists, and Freemasons alike. He was believed to have been a master of the degrees in the Freemasonic and of the Freemasonic art of conjuring demons to help one build and destroy. Left out the O and destroy, which is whether that be building civilizations, temples, businesses, or works of art. You need to have the conjuring part. And he was known to be a master conjurer. He not only created his own branch of Freemasonry called the Ordo Templi Orientis, the OTO, but he revised the rites for the honorary degree, the 33rd degree, one step above freezing, where you're unfrozen. You're no longer just frozen in the knowledge that, we're doing something benevolent here, but you're unfrozen. You've been given the light or the flame or the fire of Lucifer. You're unthawed. Now you understand Lucifer is the God that you serve in your Lord. As well as he became a world-renowned counselor and agent of royalty and politicians alike. What does the G mean? Well, in this case, it should mean game, goofy, and goober. The seventh letter. Low-degree initiates like those in the ghettos of the U.S. are told that the seventh letter of the G is for God, and that they were or are gods. But what does it mean to be a god from the perspective of the higher degrees? What's the highest meaning of that? And what does the word God itself really mean? God said, "You shall have no other gods before me." So a god is a title, not a name. What is the title really about? Where does it really come from? And why the worship of the G and the star? Rhetorical questions that will be answered in the next installment of this. Who is the true God of the Lodge, which is the source of this crafty confusion? He's called by many other names, many names, but the game's the same. The names change, but the game's the same. The God of the Lodge is the devil, whether it be Jabulon or whether they use Ja, Baal, or On. The chess game to strategically and methodically move one from the darkness of worship of the Most High Father, from the Brotherhood perspective, into the light of self-worship and ultimately the blinding light of Lucifer. Again, the Brotherhood perspective. And On being an ancient Egyptian sun god. And the word that we use to bring light to a room. Cut on the light. So hence, an insecure man called Sean Carter, no J and no Z in his name, becomes Jehovah in mockery of Jehovah and as a proclamation of, I am God. See the halo? See the slick positioning of the hands in the mudra, at least on the right hand? Let's move on. The directors of videos are oftentimes aware of this occult language because the occult language is not only to be spoken by the artist through the lyrics, but also by the producer through the beat and by the director through the imagery. So we're going to try to hurry up and get the rest of it in. Okay? 777, the use of the 7 again, it's not a protection thing. 7 doesn't protect you from the devil just because you use a 7. especially when you have a 7 in the middle of an 8-pointed star. So if you note the 5-pointed star next to the 7, okay, which is a pentagram, it's cocked 33 degrees. The star of a woman, Mystery Babylon, that's what the 5-pointed star is. It's 5 extremities as opposed to 6 extremities for a man. So what is it? Is it 5 for the 5-pointed star? Is it 7 for the 7 in the middle? Or 8 for the points on the star that surrounds the 7? The wisdom is in the veneration of Ishtar, mother of witches, and the hidden existence of Alat. And they call their wives wisdom. And Jada Pinkett's group is called Wicked Wisdom, having this overstanding. Okay, Alat is the wife, or rather the female counterpart, the reflection of Allah, and many will say the origin of Allah. But we'll look further into that in a video exclusively about that, or a live stream exclusively about that. So here's several representations of Ishtar. Notice the 8-pointed star on her head. The tarot card depicts Venus, who is also linked to Ishtar, or just the Roman version of Ishtar, of the Babylonian Ishtar, is Venus. Okay? Worship of the created instead of the creator is always the devil's goal. He knows that if he can get the most righteous and good intended individuals into self-worship, sun worship, king worship, queen worship, phallus worship, womb worship, ancestor worship, idol worship, or any form of creation or worship or of the things of this world, any form of creation worship or worship of the things of this world, that he can trick the unwitting into eventually worshiping the God of this world. And that's always the goal. And the devil will use whatever disguise is necessary to dupe man. One of the best ways, or most common ways he dupes man, is to dress as a woman, to disguise himself as a woman. And Ishtar, Diana, Inanna, all of them are all just versions of Lucifer using his feminine wiles to tempt and to attract you, as opposed to using his masculine or aggressive approach. He also has a passive aggressive approach. And so the passive aggressive approach is the one that he used most commonly on ancient man, because of the way of ancient man, and in certain civilizations more so, and certain situations more so. It's more advantageous sometimes for him to catch flies with sugar or honey than to catch flies by force or using vinegar. So the devil in drag, Ishtar of Babylon, becomes converted into Alat, queen mother goddess deity of Arabia, who was later propped up by the Catholic, or Holy Cat, or Holy Pussycat Church of Rome. And the battery is very low. We're going to try to continue to go. We're going to see what we can do here. Okay, 2 Corinthians 4:4 says, in whom the God of this world hath blinded the minds of them which believe not, lest the light of the glorious gospel of Christ, who is the image of God, should shine unto them. So here's evidence, if you need it, that the devil is the God of this world. We're almost finished. And that light is blinding. The baby has a song about the blinding light. Blinded by the light. Lots of songs talk about the blinding light, or the devil using this light to blind his initiates. And, using the sun in ancient times as a representation of that light, you had the ancient sun worship. And that ancient sun worship was just, we're told that the sun is a star. The Bible tells us that the sun and the stars are different. But whether it's sun worship or star worship or self-worship, he fools us through the use of creation worship, ignoring the Creator so that you can do as thou wilt. That's always the goal, to get you to do what you want to do and follow yourself, worship yourself. But you don't have to fall for the okie doke. If you recognize what the devil's trying to do, don't help him. I know that there's a lot of folks who find comfort in believing things like there is no God or there is no devil, or at least not God or the devil from the Judeo-Christian point of view. And you would have to consider that if there are brotherhoods that control things on the level that we have shown, and if those brotherhoods are indeed under some sort of evil spirit or trickster spirit like a devil, and if this is a worldwide phenomenon, all-encompassing, and if it reaches and touches academia, then it would only make sense that what you would find the scholars of this world all agreeing upon is that God isn't real. And a Judeo-Christian point of view or perspective is some culprit or some bad guy or some negative thing, a cause of problems rather than the solution. This is what you should expect to find logically if there were a trickster spirit controlling the men of renown, people who are authorities of a subject, or those who author the books or author the theories that we subscribe to as being factual according to this world, meaning the facts that you can prove by what university scholars and professors or historians or even theologians will tell you. You really have to have the opportunity to practically apply the things that they say. Otherwise, you're having faith in their theories. So you're exercising faith too. It's just that your faith is one that affords you the luxury of engaging in whatever your carnal delights may be without having any accountability or responsibility or let alone shame. And this is, of course, the devil's game. He likes that. So naturally, he would have a system set up where mankind would be benefited, or mankind could find benefit in ignoring the Creator and worshiping creation, whether that creation be ancestry or whether that creation just be himself. So the idea of God not being as the scripture tells us that God is, but God truly being oneself, is very attractive to man and self-serving to his fleshly desires. Let's just keep it a buck. And of course, the scholars of this world, Hollywood, the powers that be who give us the institutions that provide us with knowledge that we look toward as factual, or those who supposedly provide scholarly information to us, these people have been compromised because they too want to climb that ladder of success. They want to climb that pyramid and get to the top, and they will sacrifice their own souls, but also their integrity, and they'll sacrifice you to get there, all in honor of this spirit, which can play both roles. You know, he can use male and female, or passive or aggressive. He can use darkness or light. Some people he snatches up by white witchcraft, so-called. Others by black magic, so-called. In other words, some who think that they're doing benevolent things play right into his hand, just like those who know that what they're doing is wicked. The devil is the equal opportunity destroyer. But there's always a first. He has to start somewhere. And he does indeed understand that concept. The worst was first. So he starts with the beginning civilizations, or the civilizations that influence man the most. And he knows how to design bait for whatever fish he's trying to catch. And he symbolically tells these tales to initiates and the uninitiated alike through symbolism and through Hollywood, keeping alive these ancient spirits by using the names of these ancient spirits, sometimes for his products in commerce, other times for his art and entertainment, but always for his purposes. And that is to deceive mankind into thinking that they have freedom when they are indeed in bondage. Here you see, even in the Ishtar poster, you see, first of all, a pyramid set up with men in the fairs on both the left and right side, and to my good, cool Moorish brothers who use a hand gesture in greeting that comes directly from the Duncan's Ritual Handbook, and who believe that they are taking back some sort of magic or magical practice or supernatural practice in their wearing of the fez. You're falling right in line with what the Brotherhood wants to do. And that's to make sure that even the uninitiated or the savages or the common or the folks of the ghetto, the poor folks, are indoctrinated too. And this is a way that they do it, through inserting elements of Brotherhood philosophies throughout art and music, which is consumed by folks from the lower levels, quote unquote, of society to the higher levels of society. That's one reason why art and music are so important, and the singers and the artists are so important to the devil and to his plan, because they are essentially his ministers, sometimes inadvertently, but they are essentially the ministers who take the message that he wants distributed to the world, to the worldly, and to the religious or non-secular alike, as we saw the picture with Joel Osteen. So here you see this 8-pointed star, which is the star that you find surrounding the 7 of the 5% nation, now called the gods and earth. Again, this idea of self being God. And this 8-pointed star was around before the 5% nation. And to witches and warlocks, it's been known for centuries as the Star of Ishtar. And here you see it here. Certainly not something that a man who professes himself to be God, I'm God, God in the flesh, certainly would not want to associate himself with a star that venerates these spook gods. The whole idea of spookism within that belief system is also a way to make you nothing but willing, ignorant vessels that the devils, these trickster spirits, can play with at will. Because as long as you don't believe that they're there, they can really have their way with you. And again, the 8 points to point to the 8 different directions, all to be covered by the dominions of the devil, the prince of this world, who likes when you don't believe in him, because he certainly believes in you. And this 8-pointed star was also figured prominently in the Captain Marvel movies, where she was herself a representation of Inanna, Ishtar, Isis, Diana, Venus, Semiramis, Lilith, the goddess of witches or the patron spirit of witches, which is only the devil using his feminine side. Here it's also called they also call it the wheel in pagan symbolism, and they use the 8 points to point to the 8 primary pagan holidays: Yule, Imbolc, Ostara, Beltane, and so on. So you have the 5-pointed star, prominent again in these secret societies and used all throughout entertainment, both the 5-pointed and the 6-pointed star, the 5-pointed star being a pentagram, penta meaning 5, and the hexagram, the 6-pointed star. Interestingly enough, the 5 and the 6 together equals 11. And L-even or L-even, even as a child, you looked at that, at the spelling of that number, and you knew it was something up. Because, again, you have these 2 ones. One of the ones is you, and the other one is to represent the spirit that assists you, and actually to represent the God, and you becoming one with the God. This is why 11 is such a big deal, hence the day when the towers came down, and the towers themselves representing an 11. This is the idea of being even with El, or myself as a God, I self, Lord and Master. 11 is self as God, duality, represented by the 2 ones, or the 2 selves. If you imagine each one in 11, each of the 2 ones in 11 representing the 2 selves. What are the 2 selves? One of the selves is the magician or the initiate, or self A, and the other self is the spirit which lends its magic to him, or the familiar demon, or self B. So this is why 11 is a big deal in duality magic, or hermetic magic, hermeticism. So this is a big idea and a common theme in witchcraft. And here are the pictures that I said I would show you earlier. Here you see the friends with benefits showing and proving that circle has to do with copulation and not with male and female copulation as the figure would suggest, but and not solely with that, but the understanding. Again, there's levels to this, or degrees to the understanding. The baby bear square level, or one of the more elementary levels, is that yes, there is a divine exchange when a man and a woman become one. But there's also this overstanding that little circle that she's making, when it's done up next to the eye especially, it is to represent sodomy, which is not a form of procreation. It's a form of anti-creation. And at the end of the day, though the devil may claim to be a fan of man, as he said through the incarnation of Al Pacino's character in The Devil's Advocate, he's not really a fan of man. He really hates man. He's a fanatic for the destruction of man, if anything. But he will allow for man to destroy himself, or he allows for creation to wreck creation. Thus his recreation of life, an imitation of life, in fact, which is what he needs to do in order to remake the world anew. It's his goal to create a new world order, a new you, a new sexuality, a new nationality. A new world requires a new religion. And he's teaching his religion through reintroducing the magic that opened up portals in the ancient world and allowed for fallen angels and devils to roam the earth and walk alongside man. Once again, as it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be in the last days. And here again, as I showed you in the prior picture, people think that, Osar and Aset and Heru is all sweet. This is ancestor worship. Oh, we need to go back to the ancestors. Aleister Crowley and them, who know way more about the truth behind these spirits than you do, no matter who you've listened to, Kwesi Mfume or Dr. York or any of the people that I used to listen to, they had it wrong on purpose, I believe. I'm sorry. I believe that the Boule part of the agenda that they have is to sell to the quote-unquote black population the idea of these pagan things or these witchcraft practices being some sort of reconnection to your ancient power or reconnection to your ancestry, that which was lost, or even more so, that which was stolen from you by the white man, so that you can run to that poisonous material and intake it, mistakenly believing that it's going to give you some sort of salvation, freedom, or power in this world. All it will do is make you more beholden to the Brotherhood. If you want to find out what's really going on about any of those things, you need to be involved with the Divine Nine or the Boule, or you need to be involved with some form of New Age Noir or Prince Hall or something along those lines. Or some gang or gangster group which engages in these practices for whatever reason that they may be told, because they think it's protection or whatever. And the spirits know how to lure you in. They will do favors for you in the beginning. The classic genie or jinn, genie is just a feminization of the term jinn. It's an anglicized version and also a feminization of the Arabic term for a demon, a jinn. These familiar spirits, they will aid you. They will aid you. They will give you the harmony or melody, rather, for a hit song. They will give you inspiration for $1 million idea. They will help your movie break box office records. They will help your single fly up the chart. They will help you come up with a masterpiece work of art. All so that they can draw you in and make you more beholden to them. You owe them more and more, the more that they give you. This is why there's always a practice of giving them some sort of sacrifice. If it's Santeria or Brujeria, the sacrifice might be a chicken, or for the former, it might just be a cup of rum and a little rice. But they always want a sacrifice. And the more that they give you, the more the price, the more you have to give them to get the same thing that they gave you for less before. That's how they trick people into getting into this devil's door. And just like I said, that's Aesop Rocky and his crew showing and proving what it is that you have to do. And somebody gave him the banana in the tailpipe version of things, because again, the sigil or the pentagram in this case is a doorway through which the spirit can enter. Unless he is knowingly trying to get the spirit to enter into him, he's been put into a trick bag. And this is just the way of the business. Not just the music business, but the entertainment business, the legal business, the business of politics, the business of organized religion, and again, not the true worship of the Lord and Savior, the true and living King of Kings, not the true following of his way, but organized religion and the ways that it is used to even lead the faithful astray. So, and that is especially true when we're talking about Catholicism or Judaism or any other ism schism. Okay? The following of Christ is the only way to have power over these devils, which is what people think that they're gaining by going through these rituals and using these magical practices that and reading from magical books that have been demonically inspired and written in such a way as to ensnare the initiate, to ensnare the person looking for power. Like Sting said in the song Wrapped Around Your Finger, you will find that the servant is your master. So this very familiar, this demon that you think is serving you will end up being your master. And if you look at old cats like Gordon Lightfoot today, or you look at Keith Richards today, they are drained. Something has drained them of all life. Remember, the life of a thing is in the blood. So these devils and demons require blood. They require for you to shed blood for them, and they will also take away your own life force. So there is only one recourse, and that is to follow the true and living God, to read his scriptures and his word, to ask for the Holy Spirit to give you interpretation. It's not that the Bible has contradictions, it's that there may be some things that you don't understand. Wherever there's a problem in the Bible, the problem is generally in the man that is reading the Bible or the man that's teaching the Bible, not in the scripture itself. Again, further proof that there's a God and that there's a devil is that God could create a book that would remain true even after the devil's attempts to distort this or contort that. If one is filled with the Holy Spirit, that's the thing that the devil just can't get past. The Holy Spirit gives you the ability to rightly divide the word of truth, proving yourself to be a workman that need not be ashamed. So what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and lose his soul? So, you can look at these things and you can scoff at them if you'd like to, but a logical person and a person of great discernment will understand that what I've said throughout this video is absolutely true. And if you test it in practical application, you'll find that it's true too. And I encourage you not to dibble and dabble in the ancestor worship, or not to dibble and dabble in the new age. Don't play with it, stay with it. If that's what you're going to deal with, get to the bottom of it so you can see what it's really about. I pray that the Lord shows you, as he showed me, that these entities are real. They're not for play, and they did come to destroy, kill, and steal. And if you give the devil an inch in a pinch, he'll take a mile with style. So don't leave no doors open for him, and certainly don't draw no doors on floors. This is Unplug 'em, and until next time, if you have not received the Lord and Savior, Jesus, the Christ the Nazarene, Lord of Lords and King of Kings, you don't have to call him by any lofty names. You don't have to worry about those things. Your father may prefer for you to call him, your physical father probably prefers for you to call him father or dad rather than Willie Mae or James. So just keep it simple, student. Keep it simply scripture and call on the Lord. Ask for him to come into your life. Receive him. Ask for him to be not just your Savior and Savior, but let him be your Lord so he can show you what to do on this grand Masonic chessboard so you can play to win and not be played again. Much love. Until next time, Unplug 'em, signing off. And not quite yet. Let's touch on this because there is this duality. Again, using both sides, using both ends, using women and men's, using lightness and dark, using red and blue, using the York and the Scottish Rite too, using the young and the old. All is part of this chessboard game. Playing both ends against the middle. The names change, but the game's the same. Whether it's Bloods and Crips, or whether it's Republicans and Democrats, conservatives and liberals, whether it's the York Rite or the Scottish Rite, whether it's the Blue House of Freemasonry or the Red House of Freemasonry. They work together. This is evidenced in the many flags of the world where you find red, white, and blue. There's usually, even behind most of your major wars, there's been a combination or a working together of both sides behind closed doors. The successful revolution of 1896 was Masonically inspired, Masonically led, and Masonically executed. And I venture to say that the first Philippine Republic, of which I was its humble president, was an achievement we owe largely to Masonry and the Masons. And that's from the 33rd degree, former president Emilio of the Philippines, I do believe. And so this is why you have the red, white, and blue of the American flag. And this is why you have the red and blue state controversy. This is why you have the red and blue houses of Freemasonry. This is why you have L.A. and New York, one on one coast, one on the other coast, to help to cover both ends of the spectrum. Again, here you see who is the queen of Freemasonry worldwide. Believe it or not, it's Queen Elizabeth. And there you see her nursemaid with her, who has on a Freemasonic belt buckle with the insignia of the Freemasons on her belt buckle. And they're symbolizing the red and the blue and how they work together. And those at the top understand that they work together against me and you. So whether, again, it's one house, the York Rite or the Scottish Rite, whether it's the New York or the LA Rite, whether it's the Shriners or whether it's the Eastern Star, whether it's the Gangster Disciples or whether it's the folks. And here you have the Gangster Disciples that got at Rick Ross for his use of the six-pointed star inside of a Masonic lodge, showing and proving that they were really down with Freemasonry. There you see them even with a Freemasonic apron that they're holding up in the background. No matter what the disguise, the devil, he understands that, well, I might not be able to get you through conversion, or rather, I might not get you into converting into my beliefs through conservatism, but maybe I can get you through liberalism. And where the liberals line up with Luciferianism in some very obvious ways, trust me, the devil is very good at what he does. He makes sure that the conservatives line up in just as many ways as the liberals. It's part of the game. Left wing, right wing, same demonic bird. Both wings are needed to get this phoenix to flying. This is why it's even termed that way. Whether you're thinking in terms of the wings of a house or the wings of a mansion, or whether you're talking about the wings of an animal, it takes both wings to fly. And this country that we live in is an experiment that was designed with this in mind, the using of both houses to create a perfectly Freemasonic-minded society. Polarized, whether you fall in line with the York Rite ideologies or you fall in line with the Scottish Rite ideologies, either way you're falling in line. And that is the design. That's by design. That's the great work to create a new world order through the Brotherhood system, a new Atlantis. And in order to do so, you have to get the people's hearts and minds in alignment with your greater philosophy. And they're doing so through the Hegelian principle of thesis, antithesis, and then bringing the two together for synthesis. Even in the boxing rings, you see the red on one side, in one corner in the red trunks, and in the other corner in the blue trunks. Even Mike Tyson explained this one time of how, that's part of the design, or part of the design of the boxing ring goes back to the ancient, or not the ancient, but the old school history of the gangs, and how, it would be a representative from one gang or one group on one side and a representative from the other group on the other side. And they would use this red and blue. So again, this is the Hegelian dialectic that makes this country what it is. A framework for guiding thoughts and actions into conflicts. That's why 2020 was a year marked with conflict. It was important to bring those conflicts to the fore so that you could cause for the conflicts to be a reason for people to cry, can't we all just get along? Let's bring it together as one. Let's meld together as one, right? So the Hegelian dialectic does that, pitting both sides against each other, only to create the desire for a synthesis, for a combining of the two sides, right? Thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. So the Hegelian dialectic is a framework for guiding thoughts and actions into conflicts that lead to synthetic solutions, which can only be introduced once those being manipulated take a side. You have to take a side for their chessboard game to work. The only way to beat the devil, or to win, or the only way to keep from losing when you play the devil's chess game, is not to play. Once you take a side, you're in the game. So this Hegelian dialectic uses a framework, or it is a framework for guiding thoughts and actions into conflicts that lead to synthetic solutions, which can only be introduced once those being manipulated take a side that will advance the predetermined agenda. It's often facilitated through controlled opposition. It's called problem, reaction, solution also. Lots has been written about it. This is a great way to summarize it in picture. Thesis, antithesis, synthesis. And here's an explanation so simple that a child could get it. It's called the Hegelian dialectic, Jimmy. Basically, you create the problem to get the reaction you want, and then people accept the solution you offer, and if they are really scared, they will beg you for it. So there was the synthesis or rather, today's music is the result of is the synthesis. There was the thesis, you could say knowledge rap, and there was the antithesis, which was gangster rap, and then the synthesis, which is what we have today, crap rap. And it's all part of the chessboard game. They're making moves, playing black against white, playing male against female, playing old against young, playing southern states against northern states like they did in the Civil War, playing Democrats against Republicans, and so on and so forth. And again, always for their own purposes. It is a big idea. It's a big brotherhood with, a lot of branches from off of the Babylonian mystery system tree, a lot of different groups, Rosicrucian, Jesuit, Zionist, a lot of different groups come together. Kabbalistic magic, um, black magic, and quote unquote black magic, as in Pan-African magic, Celtic magic, white magic. It all works together against the people at the end of the day, who are the pawns. Pawns in the game. And they have us all playing chess with the devil. And in playing chess with the devil, the only way to not lose is to not play. Until next time, peace of mind.